Let's start here. Critical hearing happening today in the case against Ethan Crumbley, the confessed Oxford school shooter involved in what's being called a Miller hearing. This has to do with how he's sentenced for killing 4 people and wounding 7 others. Fox 2 Charlie Langton is live this morning for us from the courthouse. So Charlie, we appreciate you being able to do this and take a break as there's a lot going on there today. So what's happening right now?
Well, I am here inside the courtroom. We're actually down the hall a little bit because the hearing is actually going on as we speak. It started pretty much on time at 9 o'clock. It's going to last probably 2 or 3 days. It's called a Miller hearing, as you said, and basically what it means is that anyone who is a juvenile, if they are plead guilty or are convicted of a first-degree murder charge, they cannot automatically be sentenced to life in prison. This is the Supreme Court that came into existence about 10 years or so ago. So this is the Miller hearing. So the judge basically has 2 options. After hearing evidence, I'll get into that in a minute, the judge could sentence, he's 17 years old now, but Ethan Crumbley, who was 15 at the time of the crime, the judge could sentence him to life in prison without parole. That's option 1. Option 2, though, is that the judge could sentence a term of years. And under Michigan's statute, the minimum that the judge would give Ethan Crumbley would be 25 to 40 years. Somewhere in there, and the maximum would be 60 years. So there'd be 2 numbers if the judge decides that life in prison is not an option. So that's all the judge has to do. So now, the prosecutor, obviously, and the victims of many, many victims here, they want life in prison without parole. So the prosecutor has the burden of proof. The prosecutor has to show, basically, that Ethan Crumbley, because of the severity of the crime, the extensive planning of the crime, the fact that he, despite the fact that of his early age, his young age, he should deserve life in prison. Now, the defense will also get a chance to cross-examine witnesses, call their own witnesses, and basically they'll show that because he was such a young person, his mind wasn't totally developed, which is what the Supreme Court says, and it's a very extensive burden, very difficult burden that the prosecutor has to show that this teenager should get life in prison. The judge then will weigh what they call the mitigating factors, and then basically the factors to show that this was a very serious crime. It looks like what this is going to boil down to is the severity of the crime versus the youth of this particular defendant, Ethan Crumbley. And I'm generalizing a little bit because there are different factors and different rulings that the judge has to make on the record. But so far, we've only been in court about a little better than an hour, hour and a half or so. It looks like, and the prosecutor goes first, the prosecutor is showing basically Ethan Crumbley planned this murder, bought guns, and used a journal, a 21-page handwritten journal, to basically telegraph that he was going to shoot up Oxford High School. He also had texts, about 20,000 texts to a friend, texts saying like, "I want to be remembered. This is going to be the worst shooting in the school's history." And then he used social media. He put pictures on his website of him going to the shooting range with both his mother and father. And finally, there were Google searches that the prosecutor had. And the Google searches basically is that how deadly is a 9mm pistol? That was the weapon that was used in the shooting. And also, how does Michigan even have a death penalty? Those were Google searches done about a week or so before the Oxford shooting. Now, again, there's only one witness on the stand. It's the officer in charge. And the way it's going, there's going to be, again, this is probably going to last at least 2 days, possibly 3. Dina and everyone?
Does Ethan Crumbley testify in this hearing?
He could, but he won't. He won't. He doesn't. He probably will not testify, but he can. I mean, I guess there's no prohibition. We know the victims can, but I would not think Ethan Crumbley is going to testify in this case. There is going to be an expert witness, I don't know if it's a psychiatrist or a psychologist, I'm not sure, from the defense that basically will say that his mind wasn't really developed, that he's still youthful, that he was reaching out for help, or at least that's the anticipated testimony. And again, you mitigate the factors versus the factors that show that this was a very serious crime. There's about 5 factors. Youth is one, prior criminal history, etc. There's a number of factors that the judge will have to basically balance in this one.
Charlie, maybe just a little bit of a longer view of this trial. I feel like every time this killer is in court, the families, the victims have to relive that that tragic day, how much longer does this go on? Like in totality, how much longer is the Ethan Crumbley case going to be in the news?
Well, I think your question is a good one. There are a number of victims here. In fact, the judge set aside an entire room for victims. And as I read the statute, victims do have a right to speak both at this hearing and then again at a formal sentencing hearing. So your question is, how much will the victims have to suffer? They're going to suffer, unfortunately, quite a bit. And not only after today. If this case goes 2 or 3 days, the judge is going to invite everybody back to read his opinion. That's one appearance. Then the judge is going to formally sentence Crumbly, and that's another hearing. There may be appeals, and that's this case. And remember, there's another case going on right now for the parents on totally separate charges, manslaughter charges for the parents, because I'm generalizing, but they were bad parents. And in this case, this is Ethan Crumbley, who actually pulled the trigger and shot 4 people and wounding 7 others. So your question is, how long is this going to go on? It's going to go on for a very long time. And that is a factor here for this Miller hearing, is the impact of this crime. How much has it affected? But again, the judge has set aside an entire room. It's right down the hallway. So that's why I'm talking a little quieter, because there's still a lot of victims around here. You can hear a pin drop in the courtroom. The courtroom is really intense. What the prosecutor is doing, I think, effectively at this point is saying how much planning, how much practice Ethan Crumbley did, and how much he really thought about this crime before it actually happened. And I sense that we're going to also get into testimony about the really intense planning, putting Charlie, a gun in a backpack and bring it to school, etc., etc.
Charlie, I know you have to get back in there, but real quickly, shifting gears, what do you have for Let It Rip?
Yes, well, let it rip. Yeah, well, Hunter Biden is always another big story, too. I think we're going to talk a lot about Hunter Biden, and this may very well come up as well, because this is also a big hearing as well. But we'll be in here in the Crumbly court, and we'll have much more at 5 and 6 o'clock tonight.
All right, Charlie, thanks so much.
Thanks, Charlie.